If you're looking for a brand new career, like you are fresh out of high school, fresh out of college, or maybe you are just trying to pivot careers, you want something new, there's a good chance that you're probably trying to find something that's marketed as entry level, something that you can just jump right into. Unfortunately, as you have probably seen at this point, the same way I've seen time and time again, entry level does not necessarily mean entry level in job postings. So many times you'll open up job posting, you'll see entry level posted, but then when you get down into reading the job requirements, they want 5 years experience in this, or they want some kind of advanced specialized degree, bunch of certifications, or initials behind your name, all that kind of stuff. And it's not what the average person believes when they think of entry level. Obviously, when most people think of entry level, it is the idea that you can step into this job with little to no experience and be able to get the training and perform in that role, without having all those years of experience that other jobs are asking for. There are some, recruiters, hiring managers, stuff like that, who will say that when they say entry level, they don't necessarily mean entry level the way that we think of it, but they mean it is the starting point to that career set. I can understand that, but I honestly think that's disingenuous at best. Like I said before, when we think entry level, we think you can step into this job. Now, entry level doesn't necessarily mean bottom scale, low pay. That does come with a lot of entry level jobs. When a lot of people think entry level, they kind of think of, working fast food, stuff like that, and that's not necessarily the case. So, one bonus out there is that when government work says entry level, there is a lot of jobs that truly are entry level in the public service sector. And I want to bring to you 5 potential careers that you can follow that you don't need a whole lot of experience, or you don't need any experience at all. You don't always need degrees or certifications, because a lot of these jobs are going to provide you that through the job training. They truly are entry level jobs. So I'm not listing these in any particular order of, what I think is best or what pays the most, what has the best opportunity to get hired or anything like that. These are simply just the 5 careers that are entry level, little to no experience required, that you can get into if you start applying today. So the number one, again, no particular order, career field that I want to talk about in government service is going to be your public safety field. This is going to include your law enforcement officers, your firefighters, your corrections officers, anything in that general job scope. For the most part, they're not going to require specialized degrees or, extensive experience, anything like that. And the reason this is because they are going to train you both in some kind of training academy, and then they're also going to train you on the job. And the nice thing about this training on the job is that it's paid. You're going to be paid. So instead of spending 4 years in school trying to get, an education that leads to this career, you can step in. And the salaries for these positions are pretty decent. I can give you some generalized median numbers, but obviously around the country, cost of living is so different. When you consider that, in the deep South, cost of living is much cheaper than living in the metropolitan areas of Chicago, LA, Seattle, New York, anything like that. So, but generally speaking, when we want to talk about, firefighters, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics out of 2024, average salary for a firefighter was almost $60,000. For law enforcement, the median salary was around $77,000, and for a corrections officer, it was around $58,000. What you will need for these careers is going to start with a more or less clean background. Now, a blemish here or there is not necessarily going to be the end of the world. However, these are public safety fields. They're positions of public trust. If you're in the law enforcement or the firefighting route, you're going to be walking into people's homes. People's lives are going to be in your hands. If you've got a long criminal history of financial crimes or, assault and battery, stuff like that, this probably isn't going to be the career field for you. The other part is that you are going to have to be, a moderately physically fit to pass the entrance exams and to ultimately pass the academies and to be successful in the career. These can be very physically demanding jobs. With your firefighter, you're going to have to be climbing ladders, you're going to be have to carrying heavy pieces of equipment, tearing down walls, carrying people. Same thing in law enforcement, you're going to be running, you're going to be fighting, and that's going to you know extend over to corrections officers as well to some extent. But you're going to have you don't have to be Mr. Muscle, Mrs. America, anything like that. You just got to be reasonably physically fit. They're going to continue your strength and conditioning training into the academy, and it's something you should continue throughout the rest of your career. But generally speaking, these are going to be entry level jobs, not much education experience required to get in. You should apply today if this is what interests you. Coming in at number two is also a part of the public safety field, but it is a little bit different than the jobs I talked about before. But this is going to be your 911 call taker, dispatcher, operator, whatever the different agencies that you're going to apply for call it. Sometimes they are separate positions, between call taker, dispatcher. Sometimes it's like you'll work a little bit here, a little bit there. Sometimes it's progression. The bottom line is we're talking about 911 dispatch centers. Again, generally speaking, you're not going to require a whole lot of experience or a degree for these jobs. Some of them will require, some phone experience, some typing experience. Generally, they're going to want you to be able to type at some kind of minimum words per minute, whether it's 45, 60, 65. There is a lot of typing in this job. There's a lot of speaking with people on the phone, and especially speaking to people on the phone who are in distress. With that said, what you're going to need is you're going to have to be able to be cool under pressure. People are going to be calling you at the worst times of their life. You are going to have to be able to synthesize that information, put it out to the responders who are going to be going out in the field, and keeping both parties safe by being able to not only synthesize that information, but to be able to put that information out to the people in the field who are going to be responding in these scenes, basically to keep everybody safe as much as you can from behind a computer screen and over the phone. This is also a really decently paying position for something that's entry level, as much as it is. Bureau of Labor Statistics on a median national scale put this around $57,000 last year. So while you may not be walking into, a six-figure job for something entry level, I think that this pays really well and has really good entry point. Not a ton of experience, and this is something that if you can deal with calm under pressure while on the phone dealing with, real emergencies, this could be the job for you. So the number three job on this list is going to be somewhat similar to the 911 operator, but it's going to be your contact center. It's a little bit less intense because while you are likely going to deal with people who are frustrated with whatever government agency you're working for, you're generally not going to be dealing with people who are in like an emergency crisis. So these jobs are really decent because they're usually a very low bar for entry. If you have some typing skills, if you have some computer experience, if you have phone skills, those are going to be what you need to get into these positions. I have never seen one of these jobs that actually requires any formal degree or years and years of experience, maybe a year of experience at most, 2 years, something like that. But generally speaking, these are going to be pretty entry level jobs. Now, with that said, they also generally don't pay a ton, even across the board in higher cost of living areas. I came up in a pretty decently high cost of living area, and even at that, I would generally see these jobs, 16 to maybe $25 an hour at the most. You know, you might find that they pay a little more, a little less, depending on your locale. However, it is a very low bar to entry. If you are trying to make a break into government service and you are just looking to get in somewhere, these are excellent opportunities to make a break into government service. And I will say, one of the key benefits that you won't find everywhere, but you will find in a lot of these roles around, is that sometimes they can be performed remotely. I know that we're all looking to work from home. With contact centers, a lot of times they will give you a computer, a headset, and everything that you need to take home to be able to do the job. While the other jobs that I've talked about, you're generally not going to be working from home. For these positions, there is often an opportunity for remote work. So as we start to round out here, number four on the list is going to be your DMV representative. Now, I know a lot of us hate having to deal with the DMV, whether it's dealing with your driver's license or your vehicle registration, anything like that. But these are great entry level positions that have, again, a very low bar for entry. What you will need to be successful in this career is that you're going to have good customer service skills. I get it that maybe you've gone to the DMV and you haven't seen that practiced by the employees there. However, that is generally, going to help you out in this career. Good customer service skills and, the ability to maintain confidentiality is huge. You're going to have access to people's driver's license records, you're going to have access to their vehicle records. So the ability to maintain confidentiality is absolutely critical for these positions. With that said, those skills are going to be critical for you to use this position to move elsewhere in government. Once you have proven that you are able to use these different systems, you're able to maintain identities, you're able to deal with difficult customers efficiently, all these skills are going to help you either move up in your DMV career, or you might be able to move elsewhere. You might be able to move into identity fraud, or a transportation role, something to that effect. These positions are going to be a real gateway door opener for you to move on somewhere else in government careers. The pay for these is really dependent upon where you're working. I want to say generally you're probably going to be looking between 20, 25, maybe $30 an hour in some states. So not super great paying out there, but it is a great, again, it's entry level. It's a great way to get a start in government service. Finally, bringing up the rear here at number 5, it's definitely a last but not least, and I think this one is often overlooked by a lot of people, but this is going to be working in your public works departments. These careers are great if you love to be outdoors, because if you're working in public works, you are going to be outdoors pretty much bell to bell, from whether it's rain, snow, hot, cold, it doesn't matter. You're going to be out there. These positions are generally going to include your sanitation workers, your highway maintenance, anything that is going to be outdoors that the city or the state controls. You're going to be the one working on it. What's nice about these careers is that you're generally not going to need any formal education. If you're trying to get in public works and like civil engineering or something to that effect, like, yeah, that's going to take education. But if you're looking at labor positions, that is not going to take a lot of experience. It's not going to take a lot of education. They may want you to have experience, maybe previous labor roles, but generally speaking, these are pretty entry level careers. And again, kind of depends on where you work, but you're going to be probably looking between $50,000 to $68,000 a year for this type of role. What's really nice about this, and talking about the low bar to entry, is a lot of cities and states also hire seasonal public works employees. And this is a great way to get a start if you're a fresh graduate or you're just looking for something new. Summertime comes around, and certain places are going to want people to help with lawn care, with pool maintenance, whatever the case may be that your city has that they need extra assistance with. For some places that have, harsh winters, they may want people to assist with snow removal, ice removal, just depending on what the season is. Those seasonal positions can help you network and get you into a more full-time career. So if you are someone who loves to work outdoors, this is an excellent opportunity to get an entry-level career, low bar for entry, and start your career in government service. So those are my 5 picks for this video. They're not the only way to get into government, and they're definitely not the only entry-level jobs, but they are 5 great ways to make your break in not only a good break into government, but also a good break into a reasonably decent salary and a way to grow. So if you are looking for a new career or you're looking to pivot, give those 5 a consideration, and this might be the start to your brand new government career.